Season 4 of Love, Death and Robots has recently been released, and it's safe to say that this season definitely didn't land with the quality that I thought it would. In the past, Love, Death and Robots has almost been like a vessel which has allowed these really thought-provoking stories to be told in an anthological way, which allowed animators to experiment and us as the viewer to be able to experience completely different art styles. The art styles were there in this season of the show, but the stories this time round just didn't have the impact, and it almost felt like the showrunners rushed getting this season out, which feels strange to say because it took them 3 whole years to give us the measly 10 episodes that we received. I think it's safe to say that season 4 of the show failed, and there's no denying that this is comfortably the worst volume that we've received. The ratings don't lie. So I want to explain exactly why I feel that it was. Here is why Love, Death and Robots Season 4 failed. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The lack of quality storytelling. One thing about this season of the show that I feel made it fall short was the way that the stories were told. There was nothing actually wrong with the stories that we were given in their own right, as many of the episodes were retellings of short stories that were originally published several decades ago and were renowned for being good. That's often when Love, Death and Robots is at its best, but the issue with the stories came from the way that they were told to us and the lack of variation in the selection due to many of them feeling like there were a lot of comparable themes. It almost felt like the episodes were rushed and the stories never really had the opportunity to breathe, develop, and give us time in the world and universe to settle and explore what was going on. It very much felt like we were just dipping our toe in the water and we weren't ever able to go for a swim, because by the time the plot would start to develop, it would conclude. It's okay for stories to be short and concise, because we had the likes of How Zeke Got Religion, For He Can Creep, and Spider Rose, which were all pretty good and also short. So I wouldn't fault the storytelling or the way that they were executed, but the likes of Golgotha, which felt like a pretty pointless episode due to us genuinely arriving at the point where we just witnessed a conversation, and also the screaming of the Tyrannosaur, where I would have liked to have seen a little bit more context to what we were watching. Simply a bit more time within these episodes could have worked in its favour. Storytelling can be concise if it's done well, but some of these episodes were genuinely about 8 minutes and it didn't feel like it was told to us in the most efficient way, which it has to be if it's short. Match that with the fact that there were episodes like Smart Appliances, Stupid Owners, which felt like a half-baked idea that had humour from the early 2000s embedded within it. It meant that there were actually only a couple of good episodes in this season. I almost found that episode a bit insulting because it didn't have any real creativity behind it other than the art style. The story was just appliances talking about how they hate their existence and their owners in an interview-style format like what we've seen in The Office. It just felt lazy, and I feel like I've seen that whole kind of concept done before. There was no real thought-provoking message behind the story, and it was just an episode that didn't really need to be made. I almost feel like Season 2 Episode 1, Automated Customer Service, did a far better job at getting across a pretty similar message. Another large issue with the storytelling that I feel was front and center was the lack of differentiation in what the stories were actually about. It felt like every episode basically had something to do with either an alien invasion, cats wanting to take over the world and viewing themselves as superior, or the simple idea of just pets. It felt way too repetitive for its own good, and it's as if the writers had no idea where to go with the direction of the season. There was no Hibaro, Beyond the Aquila Rift, Bad Traveling, Swarm, or Zima Blue. What we were given was an excuse of a season, and I'm really disappointed with what we were given. Even the best of this season doesn't really stand alongside some of the show's greatest. One other thing that I'll touch on when it comes to a lack of differentiation is the art style. I understand that many of the styles were extremely different throughout this volume, but I just look back at Volume 1. Take the first 3 episodes, Sunny's Edge, 3 Robots, and The Witness. They all felt so different in terms of the way that they looked. They all covered completely different talking points. They moved at different paces and rhythms. They wanted us to walk away feeling completely different emotions. And the quality of them was of the highest level. It just felt like the show didn't really think enough when it came to selecting the stories in Season 3 and also the variation in the art styles, so I am very disappointed. A wasted episode. Honestly, with the way that this season opened, I feel like I should have seen that as a sign for the direction that the entire season was going to go in. The first episode of Volume 3 was a waste of time in my opinion. The whole first episode of the show was basically an alternative music video for the Red Hot Chili Peppers song Can't Stop, and it was done in the setting of a live environment. This is not what I tune into Love, Death and Robots for. The thing that got me the most with this was that the music video didn't even have any kind of narrative to it. It literally just depicted a concert with the band members and crowd as puppets. There was a point where I thought it was going somewhere, where the strings of the audience looked like they were catching on fire, where I thought maybe the whole crowd could perish. Or I even considered the idea that the crowd could have become obsessed with the music and almost got hypnotized. Or even if the band were puppets and it could have been symbolic of them feeling like these puppets for the industry and their audience. But there was none of that. It was just an empty episode that when the credits started rolling, I sat there and shook my head because I was so disappointed. It's comfortably the worst installment in the show's history, and I get that the showrunners might have thought that it was unique, and it was. But in my opinion, it doesn't have a place in the anthology. It's so far from what we would have got in previous volumes, so I hope we don't get an episode like that again. It was a wasted episode that took the place of an actual story that could have been shown to us, but knowing how this season was, it probably would have just been about cats anyway. What was good about the season? Okay, so whilst I do think this season failed, I do always try and look for the positives in a show that I criticize, and there were a couple of things that I appreciated. For the most part, the voice acting was great. 400 Boys, How Zeke Got Religion, The Other Large Thing, and For He Can Creep really did stand out with the performers that they had involved. John Boyega was great as Slash in 400 Boys. Dan Stevens really embodied a sly, villainous tone as Satan, and Chris Parnell as Sanchez brought humor to the cat that wanted to take over the world. Mr. Beast being cast as the Games Master in the screaming of the Tyrannosaur was something that I did understand because it was almost like this satire way of him becoming an animated version of himself in a futuristic world doing what he actually does in real life with the games that he creates that people participate in. And the voice acting was okay. It wasn't the best in the anthology at all, and you could just tell instantly that it was him, so that was a bit of an issue. I would have been keen to have seen who they originally had in mind before they thought Mr. Beast was the best route to go down, but I do understand why they picked him. So overall, I'd say the voice acting was probably one of the strongest things about this season. Another thing that I'll praise is the animation, especially in the likes of How Zeke Got Religion. It was so creative, the colours were so vibrant for a time that's often associated with darkness, and the demon itself looked absolutely haunting. It was a great style. I'd also say as well, with the likes of Spider-Rose and the screaming of the Tyrannosaur, there was just such a realism to it where it was just so nice on the eye. When Secret Levels was released, I originally thought it was okay, but it was no Love, Death and Robots. However now, after season 4 of Love, Death and Robots, my mind has been changed on that completely. Secret Levels triumphed over volume 4 of this, so it's going to be interesting to see how Love, Death and Robots learns from its mistakes in this season and moves forward, as this is genuinely a shell of what the show once was. So, there you have it, why Love, Death and Robots Season 4 failed. If you want to see every episode of Love, Death and Robots Season 4 being ranked, then check the video below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this season of the show? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.